It's September 4th, 2021. I'm sitting here, Saturday night. I went up for my walk. I can't do the pink umbrella walk right now, for a multitude of reasons. I'm in the room that used to be my grandfather's studio. He used to have his artwork table here, and I'd sit right about where I'm sitting now at the end of his artwork table while he would sit and he'd do calligraphy and all sorts of things, but not things that I'm able to remember very well, although now it's working. My memory seems to be working. I'm having a working memory of him. So I decided to actually redocument my star charter, which is my Gemini, which he said is another word for this at the moment in star charter. So the one side of Alpha Beta, or Alpha Beta for Beta Max, for Gemini Stargate, was wave function, quantum string, and then there was balance that he brought into the equation, because he was a very steady male figure, and I spent a lot of time with him before school began. They allowed me to spend time with Antonin Cattaruzza, and then part of the time I was able to spend some time with Judith Gunder, and she would take me to Grandma's. But Lewis was created from a wave function and a steady male figure, and that created a wave function. Clifford was a wave function, and Mariah was the quantum-induced correct genetic as a Leo at 120 to 150 degree. Like to tailor and weave and solidify so the universe doesn't collapse in on itself and crush the living organisms. The wave function and Mariah's entry created a broken infinity unit based on calendar modifications, which became a Taurus. So then a wave function and a Taurus jointed and then created my Leo to try to hold up again whatever was. But I left a chest cavity so he could gaze upon me, not so I could be sitting here with my eye sockets sunk in, because the pressure actually is crushing in on itself because nobody got my part right. I know my grandfather, my Libra, he was an artist, but nothing famous. He was just an artist by hand, and he was very good at watercolor and things. He followed the men around and documented personal history and stories by watercolor throughout the war of World War II. I do not know where Clifford was deployed. I don't have any of his records. I have to think about this for Gemini Stargate. Oh, and then Antonin was telling me when I was little how special I was, that many people knew it, but I was born with some kind of a burden which he couldn't quite understand. He said that his people liked my whatever in my ability to explain things that sometimes are overlooked, like, well, if you try to suicide me, he always used to say my English is not that well, it's not that good. He says, but you say something like, if you try to suicide me, then you suicide yourself. And if you suicide yourself, then you try to blame me for homicide. And all that does is genocide all of the people all together. So what was the purpose? He said that his side liked my philosophy and things. A lot of great that did me. Did me absolutely no good. I'm still in Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361, in this sheetrock prison. World hasn't gotten better. He used to walk around with a jacket that was this checkered pattern. Whenever I would spend time with him, he would wear that pattern a lot. Trying to think of what else he said. He said something about his people were trying to explain to him, because I didn't ask where you go when you die, but he said that his people used to ask that when he was in school. And he said it's almost like one of those like forever budding trees where you get it, they're like furry pods, like Ziada used to have them. They were like and then he drew me a picture. It's a stick with little furry buds on it, in representing an energy tree system. And he said that when he was to pass away, he would return back to the Tree of Life pod that he was taken from in order to join me here, because there are some men in the world, he said, which got confusing to him, because he said that he chose to stay in the pod, not to return if the unit was starting to crush in on me, and signs of that were represent. He said they had mentioned that I was to have 4 children. 2 children, though, were cast like almost like a burden that they were trying to fix before I became of childbearing age, because I belonged to somebody really important, and everybody wanted me to have all of the children with him as a traditional family. But instead, someone, which got confusing to my grandfather, how everybody could know so much but not know who these dangerous, disgusting men who like to poison other men's grandchildren were trying to burden me with 2 children that weren't even of our family lineage or family heritage or within our Gemini star chart, or family pod, energy pod. And so that he was not happy about, and he was frightened for me growing up about. Trying to think of how that cycle worked. So long story short is I got saddled with a Libra and a Virgo from I don't know where, in mishaps, and Green Lantern. Nuge and Anthony 75 and 2012 were watching Green Lantern tonight. I was like, I think I'm supposed to watch that. Something at the end of it said Mark Guggenheim. But then I Googled him and I'm like, no, wrong Mark. I mean, I met Nicklaus at Guggenheim, but I mean, they don't look anything like. Mark Guggenheim's got more like Jason Romer eyes, but that's it. It's got a special set on their symmetry. And then I was thinking, I'm like, I should probably mention, somebody sent me a Jockey, Jocky or EY, I don't know, on one of those stupid dating sites, because I'm 5'6". I know some people are really touchy about their height, but I mean, the man was in the most perfect proportion. I mean, his face symmetry was just like you could take a ruler out. It was so perfect. But the same thing with like squared off shoulders I mean, like everything was just, I don't know how tall he was. I don't remember the details. Just non-essential for me. But I know that Nicklaus is over 6 something or other. So I don't know if height. But I know equestrians. They're a tight bunch. Not that I've ever hung out with them or even gotten into that echelon of whatever. But I did have coffee with him in Levittown, of all places. Starbucks once. And then that was it. I mean, like, called me, we met for coffee, left, never seen or heard from again. I wouldn't even remember what his name was. Non-essential. Non-essential detail as far as I was concerned. And let's think about this. Yeah, so it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza, and it is September 4th, 2021. Oh, and my grandfather did mention, he said I drew something, and at the time, he said I was just looking out the window at the gigantic tree and the 2-car garage thinking of Angelina, meaning my grandmother who had passed away, and how sad he was in that moment. He said, and I started drawing the ivy that was on the back end of the garage. It was like a English tutor with ivy growing on it. And he said, and then later on, somebody he met with, I don't know how, he said, mentioned that that's what I would be facing and what sent these 2 burdens of grandchildren that I didn't ask for, and how it got tied into or tethered to me somehow, was this memory lapse issue that was woven into this section of building within the universe, which was the main problem. Which is why we have a regenerate life pod energy tree, where we don't have to come back into this broken unit or section. And then also I got my New York State insurance license when I went to work for Chase. They sent me to some place called Green Light, Green Lamp, Green Light, I don't know, something like that. So I had to go in Manhattan for like a 1-day class. I think it was 1 day. I can't even remember. It's so irrelevant. So I went into the room, and it was like any other of the useless human and New York classrooms. There's a bunch of like long tables. You just sit there, somebody talks at the front of the class, and at the end they give you a thing and you leave. So that was the extent of the insurance class. I think, though, somebody asked while we were there, because something about Prudential and the Rock insurance, something to do with that. And then also, like, if somebody poisons someone else, like a family member, let's say, does insurance cover that? And then they were asking, anybody know about the Hartford, if their insurance company handles poisoning? Because, I mean, there's a lot of grandchildren, and not all of us get treated the same way as the rest. Just curious. Because I don't have, like, real people to ask these things to, and that's not what they were teaching in the class. They were teaching how to pass some insurance licensing thing for some other area of humanity that's least relevant or important